Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I know this session will not be useful for some of you because you are already science communicators and so on, and it's mainly aimed for younger scientists because they are to provide tools like soft skills in communications that could be useful for young scientists. So just like a toolbox of different things. That being said, for science communicators here in the room, if you want to add points compared to what I have in my slide, don't hesitate actually to chime in also, partage to share your experience. That would be very welcome, especially in some parts like interacting with journalists. I don't have much experience, so I ask advice from other members of the outreach team on what to say. But I know some people here have lots of experience with journalists, for example. And so on. Yeah, you can come. So I tried to have like 5 main skills to discuss and to get them in a natural order. So for communicating, the first thing you need to do actually is to, when you meet people, and a great thing for meeting people and introducing yourself is what is called an elevator pitch. Do you have ever heard of elevator pitch? Everyone, yes. There are some no, so it's a good thing. At least some people will learn some stuff. Some of the stuff will probably be obvious for some of you. It's probably not obvious for everyone in everything because I see always mistakes for presentation and so on. So an elevator pitch is 1 to 3 minutes. Basically, it's the time you would have if you were in an elevator ride, a long one to be 3 minutes, like a long elevator, and you just have the time to introduce yourself, your work or your project, and it needs to be very concise. And of course, you don't give the same elevator pitch to someone that is in your very specific field. In my case, for example, I work on the satellite Plateau and Exoplanet. If I'm at a Plateau conference, I will not give the same speech than if I am at an Exoplanet conference or at a Europlanet meeting or at an even larger meeting not linked to Europlanet. So in terms of structure, like an elevator pitch, first you should state who you are and not finish with that like, oh, by the way, my name is Thibaut, in case you don't know. So you should start with your name. Then you should state your problem, what you're working on, or you tackle it and try to solve it, what is new about your approach to really sell yourself, and also highlight a key result if you have or two. And if you can, so you can try to end with an open-end question. So it's a question that cannot be answered simply by yes and no, to maybe link to what the person in front of you, if you already know what they are doing, they are working on, so you can potentially start a collaboration. So yeah. Of course, you can also, if you are looking for a job, you can also have a different elevator pitch, especially if you want to go out of academia where you identify yourself, then you talk about your goals as a professional. So for example, I want to become a communication, like an outreach person for space science, and then you can mention your skills. I do graphic design, press release writing, and these kind of things. And then 1 or 2 projects that you can mention and be ready to get a business card to give in this kind of case. So business cards are still useful. So things not to do is try to rush in the 3 minutes as much information as you can. It's better to actually let the person miss some information so they can also talk to you than trying to pack and like bombard the person with information. You should also not go too much in technical details, especially if it's people who are not specialists. And be careful also not to rehearse too much your elevator pitch. It should not sound like it's something you know by heart and you are repeating to everyone you meet at the conference. Ooh, nice to meet you. I'm doing this and that and this. It's actually a worse impression from the person than like hesitating and so on. And body language is of course very important. So like don't forget to smile when you talk to people, to look more engaging and so on. So we will start with a little exercise. and I will ask you to pair with your neighbor 1-to-1 to do a 3 minutes elevator pitch. So you pair with one person. We can do a breakout room for Vix and Vito online so they can talk to each other. So you do 3 minutes, then you exchange, the other person give their elevator pitch. Okay? So how many are we? So I think we can do 2. Wait, no. Two. So James, can you do maybe with Can? So two. Okay. And then I can. So I start the chrono now. You have 3 minutes. First person to introduce himself. So now you will give the elevator pitch of the person that was next to you to a small group. I think we can do groups of 6 people. And so I would even say 30 seconds because it's more well attended than I thought the session. I thought there would be less people with being one of the last session. So we can do like groups of 6, and then you need to tell what your partner is doing to the other 5 people. And you have 30 seconds and you rotate, okay? So we can try to do the group. So we have one group of 6. So then you are a group of 6 also.
Maybe we can.
Then we can do a group of 6 also. Perfect. Yeah.
Maybe it's easier than
And so that way, don't talk alone. Like really to the group of 6 people you need to explain. And that way you can see what the other person remembers from your elevator pitch. Do they remember what you want them to remember? And if not, maybe you need to improve your elevator pitch and insist more on what you want them to remember about you. Okay? So if the groups are ready, I can start the 30 seconds.
Okay, then you could go.
Ready? Go! 30 seconds. Okay, stop. Stop. Now the person can say if something was missing or not. So you have a few seconds for debrief. Otherwise, and go to the next person. Oh yeah. Next person, go. Next person again. It's very quick. It's all free to stick to the and last person of the group. Yeah, we have and we do like a communication. Telecommunication. For one okay. We are done with the last person. So, are you guys happy with what the other person remembered of you and how they presented you? Like, what was the thing that struck you? Yes? Yes. So you all did a good job at presenting yourself, and if you are okay, so you can get back to your seats, and we can go to the next little exercise. I should actually keep track of time, and don't hesitate to regularly practice this because it's very useful to be able to introduce you to others very concisely. So
I'm gonna go to elevators.
and if you're in American TV series, you can actually stop the elevator with this button. You know, like all the police series, they stop the elevator to speak together. So, and then they restart. So the second skill we are going to have a look at together is actually about giving talks and presentations. And as I say, there will be probably lots of things that seems obvious, but they are actually not that obvious, it seems, because so many people are missing them. So the first part is preparing your slides. You should keep points fairly short in your slide. Don't put very long sentences. You should also write big so people can read from far away. I mean, here it's at the limit of being okay. If I would go smaller, it start from my distance, it starts to be difficult, and some rooms are even bigger, so it's even more difficult. Of course, keep minimalist on each slide. You should not have too much text, otherwise it's an overload. People don't know where to look at. And actually, the fact to come point by point is a good thing if you want to keep people focused, so they are not distracted by reading the rest of your slide while you are talking. Also, at the end of your slide, you should include a takeaway slide, which you probably see very often in conference. I don't know if some of you, it's your first conference here today. Well, not all this week. So, yeah. And in my opinion, but that's very dependent. Some people, it's the contrary. I prefer when it's a dark background because I find it's less hard on the eye. It's less strain on the eye. But some people prefer very light background on the contrary. Yes?
I don't know if that's true, but I heard that it really depends on what kind of like how big the room is and how light the room is.
Yeah.
And that if it's very big and light room, then it's actually helpful if it's white background because otherwise
it can be, yes. So it's very dependent on the place, on the people also. Some people prefer like they're very like classic. No, I want white background. Yes.
Just to this last point, it is recommended to have two versions. Light can change, and also you never knows which will be light environment. So as it is possible, it is very good if one has a black background or white background.
It takes a bit of time though to do both versions.
I was just gonna add, probably hard to do this part because you never know. Only in my case, I don't know what kind of venue will be, so I'm there. And I have to upload the files before.
For that part. So it's also, as I say, the preference on the people, but it was, as I say, this is my opinion. I know some people disagree. Yeah.
I actually think it's really good because it's good for dyslexic people. White text on black backgrounds more accessible.
For dyslexic? That I didn't know. It's a very interesting point. So for me, I as I say, I prefer them because I find them less, when it's very bright screen, I find it's less like exhausting for the eye. And the second point about background is that you should try to get like to enrich your background slightly. So get like some little decoration, but don't overdo it. You should keep moderation on this, but like a little bit of enrichment, so it can be just like a line or something, shows that it's not like a basic stuff you did like very quickly, and it's that you put more time into it. Even if it's the pre-made ones from PowerPoint, which in my opinions are usually not so great, but that you will see I also used in another part of the presentation later. So what you should not do is use plots that are super tiny and cannot be read. Even if on your screen it's easy to read, a good exercise you can do is put your screen like 1.5 meters away from you and try to see if you can read the plot. Because that's the feeling that the people can have with a distant screen like in this case. And in this case, the screen is still like pretty close to us. So yeah.
So also, as for plots, it's always good to read the labels, what the Y and X axis stands for, not just to let the audience read them by themselves.
When I say unreadable, I also talk about the axis. And thank you for precising. It was like I didn't. Yeah, for me it was like obvious that I was also mentioning that, but
that's not what he said. I think he said that you should also mention it during your talk.
yeah.
What's on the exit?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, that's-
Yeah. So, yes. Sorry, I misunderstood what you said. Now, you should always explain a plot more than just mentioning. You should not have a plot and be like, oh, the result is clear. You should really guide the people on your plot. It's something I didn't mention. Avoid writing full sentences except if it's a quote, because then people will just read the sentence and not listen to you. And you should avoid to put too many equations if you don't explain them. And actually, in my opinion, you should not put any equation at all for a science talk. It also depends a lot what is your science. Like some people, like if their work is to develop equations, they will disagree and they have to put the equation. But personally, if I see an equation, I start to not listen to the talk. I know, and I know I do that. I try to fight it, but still I don't manage to. Like it's automatic. Like my brain is like, oh, an equation. Okay, what else is going on? So yes. So and especially the more complex the equation is. But if you have an equation, also you should really explain what it means, what the terms, why it's important, because then the people will be like, oh no, actually there is an equation, but yeah, that makes sense to put it. So you should really explain them. So and I see so many times like people who bombard equations and you have no clue of what it is. And of course, you should not add many animation to your text. There is nothing more annoying than the text coming bit by bit like that. So that's a counterexample. Yes.
Add that if you're using PowerPoint and you use some effects like you use now that the lines appear one by one, sometimes it can happen that the place where you have to present the PowerPoint doesn't work and you have a backup PDF, but then the PDF obviously doesn't do that. So the animations that you probably have to have multiple slides with all the points instead of using the inbuilt functions.
Yes. So actually, usually my slides, I do them like I copy paste my slide and do it manually.
Yes.
Yes.
But apparently, I've been said this week that you are supposed to click an option when you save as a PDF to say that it should generate each slide alone, which would make much more sense and save a lot of time. But I still haven't found where. But apparently, you can do it. So, but yeah, animations, like I think you were doing like this animation, like this kind of thing. Please don't use them. Please don't use them, except if it's like very situational or very like linked to your storytelling. Then you can use it, but otherwise avoid them. It's more distracting than helping your talk.
Okay.
But yes,
I had success with caricature of myself, small figure, moving across the screen and pressing important point I am just talking about.
that can be a good way to actually complement your storytelling. So yeah. When you're preparing your talk, you should ask someone to proofread your slides to avoid mistake like having an S or like this kind of things. I personally didn't do it I kind of did it for this talk, but yeah. So if you see mistakes, that's actually a good counterexample of something that colorblind people would probably not see. So you should make sure they are accessible for everyone. So you have website like color blindness where you can put your slides and it generates how it would be seen by someone of different type of color blindness, so you can see where it's not good. You have accessibility checks also within PowerPoint if you use PowerPoint, so you can go in tools, accessibility. That's also if like for visually impaired people, if they use like something that reads the screen for them, the computer is going to the different sections and it knows that if it's like a title, it needs to read that and so on. So it can say like, oh, your titles are twice put, which would annoy like a software that is able to read your PDF for someone and so on and so on. And you also have like Adobe Color, as we discussed the other day, that can do this kind of checks for accessibility. Then practice your talk. It's a good thing, just to be sure, especially in conferences where you have a strict time, to make sure that you end up in the time you need. And also make sure that you have prepared some figures of speech, like storytelling, like rhetorical questions, analogies that can help to sell your point to the people, to make people better understand what you try to explain. Okay, when you give your talks, you should know your audience also. As I mentioned, that's something that you will see at each tool. Know your audience. Like, you need to adapt when you talk, but anything you do in communication, you need to adapt to the person you have in front of you, and so you don't give the same talk to like something like ear than something which is very general to astrophysics, or something specialized in your very, very specific field. Check your time regularly. The worst part is when people, they realize, oh, I only have 1 minute, and they are only at the end of the intro, and then they rush the result, which is the most interesting. So try to get a watch and look at it regularly. Even if people see you are watching the time, it's better than if you have to rush the result at the end. In between sentences, keep some little breaks. Don't talk for 1 or 2 seconds, so people have time to understand what you just said, digest the info, and move forward to the next point. And that's another thing. If you are stressed before the thing, you can take like a superhero pose, like well, if you're in a conference, you cannot really do that. But let's say it's like a talk with the public and like at the school, and you are in a private place, so you can be like take a superhero pose like for a few seconds, and then it boosts your confidence, make you feel good, and you can use these kind of things. You can use, as I say, if you are in public, you probably don't do it, but if you're in private just before the talk, you can do that to help with stress relief. It doesn't help physiologically. I was discussing that with Ariane just before, but she says that it shows that it helps with mentally with the stress. And also you can do the breathing exercise that Ariane mentioned. So like for people who are not there this morning, so you breathe in 4 seconds, breathe out 6 seconds several times, and then for a few minutes, it reduces your stress level. And one other thing I would say, try, if you have like things that you feel empowered with, don't hesitate to use them. So like it can be like an outfit if you feel like very good, like for Superman, like in that might not be the best, but like for example, in my case, I know that when I wear like a suit with a jacket and so on, I feel like, I don't know, I feel good, I feel nice. It's always better. You feel more relaxed if you feel empowered. So it can be also like some specific jewelry. I mean, you see, I have many rings, but it's not linked to that. So yeah, so don't hesitate to use these little things to reduce your stress level. Like empowering things are important also. Or if you have like a comfort food, try to eat your comfort food before and so on. In my case, it's iced tea. I don't have one now. And things to avoid is to speak like that during your talk. It's something that I see even here a lot of time in Europlanet, and it's you fall asleep when someone is speaking so monotonously. You need to put energy when you speak. You need to emphasize specific words. So that's something really critical. And I hear so many people, as I say, this week again, I heard, especially in the senior people, I would say, I hear so many people who are speaking with one voice, no accentuation. Imagine that like you are in the theater and you are like an actor at the theater, like you don't say, oh no, my wife is coming back. It's like, oh no, my wife is coming back. I need to hide. So yeah, exaggerate a little bit when you speak, when you give a talk. It's more dynamic. It's more engaging for the audience. Don't use acronyms or technical slangs if people will not know. It's part of adapting to your audience. And even if your audience is really specialized, they might have forgotten what, for example, I don't know, FWHM means, full width half maximum, this kind of thing. So if you have like you should always define them before using them again in your talk. The same on a poster, by the way. And then there is so many talks I've seen in conference where the person is like So you can see here, and then the person speak all the time back to the audience. You need to establish like eye contact with the different people. And I know that, for example, in my case, I tend to be actually turned more on one side of the room, so I should try to look more at the people on this side. So, but yeah, make sure that you don't spend all your time back to the audience, because either you are checking your slides because you are not, that's where you need to have practice, or because you are, like, as I say, trying to point with the laser.
Also, I could add to that point, in large conferences, there's usually microphones, and if you turn back, people cannot hear you and you don't notice as a speaker. So I see this multiple times, and it's just bad for everyone.
Make sure you speak in the microphones also, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
So I should bring this one closer. That was all for the presentation part. As I say, it's not necessarily going into details in everything. The goal is to get different things. I think I need to go forward because I'm a bit late. Now we can talk about developing an online presence, and that I'm not an expert on, so I ask my colleague to help me prepare the slide. So why should you develop an online presence? What do you mean by online presence? It's social media, website, and these kind of things. Well, nowadays it's a must for people for their career as a scientist. I had colleagues of mine, like advanced postdoc and so on, that were giving like a talk about application and so on, and they were saying, if on your CV you don't have a website, people sometimes they just discard because they cannot check more stuff about you. So if you don't have a website, or if they cannot find you on Google, if you don't put it on your CV, if they cannot find you on Google by typing your name, the scientist, or they just discard if they don't know you. If they know you already personally from conferences, that might be different. But if you want to go for postdocs, apparently, some people say that a website is more or less very, very important. I'm not sure if I agree totally, but it's clear that if you have a website, people can find you, and it's always better from that point of view. So it doesn't hurt, at least, to get the website. So if you want to put all the chance on your side, you should try to get this. Also for society, it's important because there is so many misinformation now. I think you have all seen with the COVID and the vaccine, all the problems. So it's important that scientists, they create dialogue with society, even at their local level. I'm not sure any of us will manage to reach like 1 million subscriber or something like that. But even at local level, it's important to talk to people, to like help fight misinformations, like these kind of things, to help society. And it's important also for society to be aware of what we do, because in the end, society has a high impact on politics. They can pressure a lot of the politics, and the politics are the one funding science, so funding us. So if you want a job, you need politics to be for science, and you need society to be for science also, because they are the one pressuring the politics and electing them. But just the next point. So how to develop an online presence, not in the sense of, oh, you should do this to increase your number of followers and so on, because that there is, in my opinion, there is no magical recipe. You just need to keep trying if you want to get, for example, social media presence. There is no thing that like, oh, just do this and you will have like 1,000 followers, except paying the social media to get abonnement. And what you should do is to show that science is not just something distant. It's people who are doing the science, who are doing everything, who are doing this research. And from that point of view, that science is also human in terms of, it's not always right, but it's okay. It's about learning, so it's okay not to always be right. The important is to go forward all the time. It's also, from that point of view, important to show that science is not something like scientists can also be seen by the public as being arrogant or posh, because like, oh, they know better than everyone else. It's important from that point of view to recognize also our mistakes, and to show that Also, science is inclusive, so in particular, show diversity to push people from diversities to also join science, mainly when you are interacting with younger public. And also that science is not something like, if you say, like even probably maybe your parents, you tell them what you are doing, they're like, oh, that's so complicated. I don't know how many of you had responses like that from your family, like, oh, no, but it's so complicated what you are doing. I find we are not doing something too complicated. There is lots of math involved sometimes, but not even too much. And it's the physical principle. I think they don't need the math to be understood by people, so you need to break into bits and pieces. And of course, show why science is very cool. So what you can use is TikTok if you are very young. If you like to, that's the part where I'm not sure. I mean, I would not use TikTok. I'm too old for that. So yeah. So if you are young and cool, my colleague Rod, you can use TikTok. Otherwise, if you have like some very visual stuff like instrumentation and so on one channel, you can use it Instagram. It might be difficult otherwise if you are doing like numerical simulations, Instagram might not be the best thing to use if you want to share your daily life. Twitter and Mastodon, if you are more like on a written part actually and less into videos and so on. LinkedIn is very important. I mentioned websites. More and more scientists go to LinkedIn. At the same time, I know lots of people are going away from LinkedIn, but yeah, it's LinkedIn is also very important if you want to go to industry later. For example, like it's very crazy how different community use LinkedIn or not. I'm navigating between different ones. For example, graphic design and graphic design. If you are not on LinkedIn, you are nowhere. So you must have one. So if you want to get some people contacting you as well. Personal website or even YouTube if you are into videos and you feel, but YouTube, for example, is a big investment to prepare. A few notes, make sure you do design. I'll try to go faster because we're in time. Engage and discuss with your community. Don't go two-way communication is always important for the people, always important. And don't be shy of having opinions. It's not because you are a scientist that you don't have opinions. And mentions that there are sometimes your own opinions. And also, it's important to show why what you are doing is important for society. Okay, so for a few tools that you might have a look at, it's like Canva and Adobe Express. There are two free tools that you can use to help you design stuff that you will post on social media, like visually. So they have lots of different things, templates, and so on. You can also have a look at some stuff like Hootsuite. It enable you link your social media if you have many ones, also multiple ones, and then you schedule a post and it's automatically posted across the different stuff. While you cannot schedule social media post, I think, on your own. And if you go on the video side, for example, a small microphone that you put here at the collar, it's super cheap and it makes a huge difference in terms of audio quality and how people will find engaging your content. Oh yeah, and for websites, you can have a look at WordPress or Wix, for example. We personally recommend with Courtney that you use WordPress because it has lots of library, lots of plugins that you can install to do whatever you want, and you can have it for free for no time. I mean, you can always pay for additional stuff, but like Wix, we think it's more limited. You need to pay more directly to get some stuff you want. So. Okay, so we can move to the next skill, which is talking to the public, next toolbox. So if you give a talk to the public, same guidelines as a talk. That's easy. Adapt to your audience once again. So read body language in the assistance when you are, or if you are doing one-to-one interaction. And if it's, you will feel usually if in their body language, if what you are saying, they are completely lost. They have no clue what you are talking about because it's too difficult. too complex. So then you need to go back and simplify. Or sometimes it's the contrary. They are like amateur astronomer and they know sometimes even more than you. And then you need to complexify and give more explanation because you feel that they are already knowledgeable. And the thing is about proofreading your slides, I didn't do it correctly. So. And of course, if you are doing one-to-one discussion with someone and they try to, you are trying to explain something, but they diverge on some specific aspect of astronomy that you are not very familiar with, it's better to follow their interest than trying to force them in what you were trying to explain. And from that point of view, you should also go out of your comfort zone and be willing to explain what is a black hole. I think for most people here in the audience, we are astronomers and astrophysicists, and we have the basic knowledge compared to most of the public to be able to explain things like black hole and so on. We might not be expert on that, but we still are able to explain. I hope all of you are able to explain what is a black hole. Some of the stuff, it's become more difficult, like I would not be able to explain particle physics, but then it's important also to say to the public, well, I don't know, I actually don't know, or that's not my specialty, I cannot help you with that. Okay, so a very important point actually is to not overestimate your audience knowledge. Are some of you familiar with my thesis in 180 seconds? So it's a competition where you have 3 minutes basically to introduce your thesis, and it's like a competition. So in the audience, people are voting for the one they preferred. One of my friends did it. So it was about brown dwarf, stars, and exoplanets, and like population analysis, basically statistics. And at the end, someone came like, oh, it was very interesting, like multiple people, it was very interesting, but didn't really follow what is a star compared to a planet. So don't assume people will know very basic stuff for us, just like what, or even the fact that the sun is a star. Lots of people actually from the public don't know that. It's like every time I have a public event, I have people who don't realize that the sun is a star like the other. So you should, yes?
I was explaining something to a group of friends of mine, and I was assuming way too much. And one of them was like, is the Milky Way in the solar system? And I was like, okay, I guess let's start from the top.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly a good example. You should really never overestimate. Like if you talk about the Milky Way, you should also explain, because people have in mind, oh, it's a galaxy, but the galaxy are usually these things. So why is it like a pen? You need to say, okay, it's because we are inside. You really need to go back basically, and that's why I say usually it's better to underestimate your audience knowledge and complexify as you talk to them than the contrary, because then you will have lost them, and when they are lost, they will not listen anymore. Analogy are also a super useful tool to better explain something. Like if you are trying to explain granulation on the sun, you can easily say, okay, you see water that is boiling in a pan, you see like the surface is like blurred. It's because the hot water is going up and the cold water is going down, and it's making this convection movement. And then you can say the same in the atmosphere, and then the atmosphere is trouble, or the sun, and this kind of thing. So don't underestimate like analogies with things that people know from every day. It's like a super strong tool to carry like your message and to get people to better understand what it is. They will maybe not understand 100%, but more than without any analogy. And the last thing is to repeat and reformulate what you are saying for better understanding. It doesn't mean that you need to say right after the other stuff. I'll give an example. So we have like a inflatable planetarium in Switzerland, and when I do a show, I do different things. At some point, I explain like the life cycle of a star, and I mention that there is like this equilibrium between gravity and nuclear force that try to push everything away. And then I move forward and I say again. And so because there is this equilibrium between this and that, so it's not, it's repeating, but without saying it right away the same, because there is this equilibrium. At some point, it can be broken, and that's why you have like inflation of the star or decrease of size. So reformulate and repeat, but not. It's difficult to explain actually. Don't do it like right away. Let a bit of time and try to come back, remind to the person one of the concepts that you have been mentioning. So it's when you repeat, it's like getting better into their memory. And yeah, as I was saying, don't hesitate also to say that when you don't know. I wanted to do a few exercises now where you can, it's very basic stuff. We will start with basic and then we will increase in difficulty what you have to explain to your neighbor. So we can, yes, we have the time. So you can again talk to your neighbor and in 30 seconds, explain them what is a planet, maybe. So try to define what is a planet to your neighbor. So it's only one person to your neighbor. So you partner with someone, and one person does this and does a different part of the exercise, and then we will switch. And I have other stuff to explain for the second person, so it's not so you are fresh and not influenced by the explanation of the other person.
Who wants to? Do you want to explain?
So you have 30 seconds. It's fairly short. Ready? And go. So people online, you can text us if you want to do like a breakout room to also do the exercise together. First person to introduce himself.
Orbital trajectory design. I have experience in all this really practically. We call it a very broad padding. Yes. I've been involved in I've been involved in
So you need to be ready to deal with complotist theory and so on. I once had like someone in an event that was like he was talking to one of my colleagues and I took over because my colleague was very uncomfortable. He was like trying to push to say like, oh, we have never been to the moon and so on. And that's the kind of reaction you should not get in front of the people. You need to stay cool and be able to explain. So be ready to deal with this kind of people. Yes, you want to share an experience like that?
No, but I mean, I totally agree.
Oh, you don't agree with the fact we have been to the moon?
Yeah, I totally agree, but I also think that there are certain situations or people that are so convinced by their opinion. For example, at our work, we both work in a planetarium, we had colleagues that had people that were flat earthers, and they just came to discuss with, and there is a point also, I think, where it doesn't matter. I mean, you can try to talk with them, but there is a point where you just also can say, it's enough, thank you, in a very polite way, and just leave, because you won't be able to convince them if they're so convinced by their own opinion. So I also feel like it's okay to sometimes just be like, okay, I tried, goodbye.
Totally. The important is to stay polite and not laugh at the person, and especially if you have other people, because as I mentioned, you must show that science is not arrogant and so on, and try to be inclusive, and you can debate a little bit, but don't spend your time on that. Yes.
I will just comment on what she said, that sometimes these people are like ready to fight you. So sometimes you just need to back up because they are sometimes wild.
With a baseball ball. And for talking to the public, I just want to finish by giving a few like tips about if you organize events, what you can do. If you bring posters, make sure it's even more minimalist than a poster for a scientific conference with big fonts and so on, really little information. People will not stay. They are not scientists. They will not stay and start to read a scientific poster. I advise personally also to bring experiments or interactive display. It doesn't need to be like very fancy. It doesn't need to be like super polished. Usually if it's interactive, people are already happy if they can better understand how something works. Like, for example, if you have like a table with a circle with stretchy fabric to show gravity, they are like super happy, even if it's very basic stuff. They are super happy to be able to better understand some physical concept. So games, also, it's always a good way to engage people. It can be riddles, it can be like board games also. We have lots of board games that are linked to astronomy. They are just usually quite long, so it might not be the best depending the type of event. If you have lots of turnover and you cannot keep the people for half an hour, board games might not be the best, but you can have lots of different kind of games where people can participate. And I would say also trigger emotional responses. So like by creating surprise, you might have heard for some of you that with Europlanet, we went to Fantasy Basel, which is like a science fiction and Comic-Con event. So not at all science. And one of the main goals there is actually to surprise people first when we come there, because they are not expecting to find real science in a science fiction event. And it does work a lot. We have like a guest book, and people say like, oh, I came for the sci-fi and I was so happy to find real science. We have such message. And over the years, though, the response is changing, and now we have like many people, when they come to the events, they are looking for us, and especially the students, for example, the students that were more like teenagers and now they want to go to universities. They know we are here and they are coming back. So there is no more the surprise, but they were surprised in the first place, and they have this good emotional answer. So illustration can also be useful. Like everything artistic is usually a good way to trigger emotional response. Positive response is better than negative one. So negative buzz is, some people say buzz is buzz, but negative buzz is never a good thing, I think. And it's always important, again, when you're at event, to promote diversity and equity, to bring more people so we can tackle the problem. It's in outreach that we can really tackle the source of this problem. Like you might be aware of leaky pipeline and so on. If we don't also have like 50% in terms of gender equity, for example, at the beginning of the studies, for sure it's not possible to get 50% at professorship level. And if we don't have the 50% at the beginning of the studies in many countries, it's because younger people, they don't feel like it's a good thing. And so that's for younger people that we only need to address that. And be ready to answer about your studies and your career, because that's questions we have a lot in public events. Okay. Now I'll quickly go through media interaction and press release and why it's important to do a press release for your career. It's a very good thing, actually. You have lots of grant application now that have like a field where you can input this kind of stuff, like public event you did, like visibility you add. So press release is good for that. That's me. It gives you visibility. That being said, be careful if you want to go for a press release. Unfortunately, it means you are also exposing yourself to attacks from people or comments. Unfortunately, I will take one example. We had a colleague who made a press release about brown dwarf. And of course, some people, when journals like newspaper republish that online, in the comments you could see stuff like, oh, but you're actually not so tall, you're right, you're a dwarf, all these kind of things, because she's arriving here to me. And brown dwarf is actually naine brune in French, and bruns mean like the hair color. So you would like sexist comment and so on. That's unfortunate. In this case, for example, we, with the university, contacted the journal and say, please moderate your comments, but be aware that, and in particular women, unfortunately, if you go for press release, you expose also yourself to this kind of thing. That's very unfortunate, and I hope mentality will evolve. I think it's better already than a few years ago, but I hope it keeps improving. And so, yeah. So press releases are good for you, but don't go too personal. Don't read like comments and so on, because that might not be good for your stress level. So how does it work to actually make a press release? First, you need to contact your institution or like the media. You have a media team usually in your institute, sometimes a communication team. Contact them and contact them when you already think of publishing the paper linked to the press release. Don't wait for the paper to be published. You need, at the latest, when you submit, you need to contact them. It's very important because some teams, they meet only once per month. So they will not be able to discuss if they want to go with your press release or not for a month. And some paper publication can go way faster. You need to tell them why it's interesting for the media and why it's new. That's a very important thing. Why your study is new and unique, that's what usually will make your study be published. So it doesn't need to be like super exciting. That's a lot, depending a lot on who will publish the press release, like on the university. Each university has their own style. And then you will write with your communication team a draft. And then once you have approved it, everyone has approved it, and it's illustrated, then it can be published when the paper is published. In terms of timeline, so I said contact your team when you are submitting or even before if possible. I have the example of a chaos press release we did recently. It took us from the process started in November and it was published here only in June. But if we were not aware at the beginning, it would have been very difficult because it was like with ESA, it was with Cambridge, Bern, Geneva, so many universities, many people, and it takes time to coordinate so many things. It was with MNRAS, it was with ANA, so lots of things. So the more complex, the more time it needs to be. The writing of the press release took maybe 2 days in itself, but it's all the coordination that can be long also. Be aware that there might be other priority for your communication team also. Sometimes if there is like 2 subjects, well, one will have priority, unfortunately. And people, they are here to help you usually in the com team, but they don't have an infinite amount of time. So unfortunately, we sometimes have to say, well, you came too late with your subject. We already have planned something, and I have no time until next month, so I cannot help you do a press release. You should have. So the earlier you contact someone, the more they can plan to get you actually as a press release. And yes, as I say, the writing itself can be fairly short, but it can be that the reviewing process after takes like a couple of weeks, because like everyone is chiming in some stuff, like saying like, no, we should say like that and not like this for political reason and so on. So it takes a bit of time. And very, very important, don't put your paper on archive before you publish a press release. People like ESA, they hate if you do that. So they don't. Yes.
I was impressed by that.
No, it's the people like in the case of the Chaos press release. So it was 4 paper actually, and ESA clearly said don't put on archive your papers before we do the press release. So that's also dependent, as I say, it will depend a lot on your institute and so on. And I think in some case there can be like arrangement, like they can agree if your data are very sensitive and you don't want to be spoiled. So it can work. Like when Trappist 1 was released, that was I think that was okay. In terms of structure, an abstract is actually a press release is the contrary of a talk. So you start with the most important, the result and why it's new, and then you dezoom bit by bit to finally reach the global context. So it's really the contrary of a talk, and it's an exercise to actually write that. I struggled myself. You can ask Anita. I struggled the first time to write the press release because I was still going the wrong order, even if I was trying to fight it. And important is that it should be cuttable, so you should be able to take only the first 2 paragraphs, because a lot of journals will not take the full thing, but only the 2 paragraphs. And so, yeah. And some university wants to divide the different parts in titled paragraph, which is also an exercise in itself. So yes. Also, a good title is very important. In the case of the press release I mentioned of CHAOPS last week, I think we had a better title than the ESA version of the press release. So ours was shared a lot more by media, even though as Switzerland, we are a smaller country. So I was very surprised, but I think it's linked to that. Because we were like saying like it's a game and so on. You will usually have quotes in a press release because like newspaper are very interested by that and they republish more easily. And quotes, they are very useful also for your science officer, for your communication officer, because it enables to say stuff which is controversial because it's in your opinion and not the one of the uni. It also enables to say differently some stuff, better express something because it's not the same type of language. So sometimes it's easier to explain something with a different style of language. And also, don't be surprised, you will usually not have said those quotes. It's your communication officer that will write a quote and then ask you, are you okay to have said that? Are you okay? Do you approve? And usually they will also ask you, okay, you can modify it and rewrite the same idea more like you would say it. Like everyone has their own words they like to use, so they will ask you to rewrite it. But usually it's not an actual quote from you in the press release. It's more like, okay, I need at least 2 quotes in that press release. What can I put as a quote? This is interesting. Okay, this person says that, and then that's how it works usually. So just for you to know, because I realize that at my institute, most of the junior researchers have no clue how press release process work. In terms of diffusion, I will try to accelerate because I see I have not much time. In terms of diffusion, so usually they are sent not only to journalists, but also websites specialized in press release and like centralizing all the press release for the journalist. And it can spread usually for at least a week or even up to a month before it's not shared anymore worldwide. And in my case, I've tracked some press release I've done, and they went like, you can really see how it spread throughout the world, because first it's only the journals from the countries, and you're from different countries in Europe, then you start to have America, Then you start to have Asian version, like in Japanese, Vietnamese, and so on. So you can really see how it spread across time. And 99, I would even dare to say 99% is just a copy paste of the press release. They don't rewrite the stuff. Sometime a journal will rewrite, and then there will be a copy paste of this rewrite, but people don't do new stuff. What you will have a lot, though, is automatic translations and automatic synonym replacement. So lots of websites, they replace automatically some words with tools. I think it's linked to referencing on Google, because if you have the same text exactly, Google is not referencing you when you're in the search results. So to avoid losing places, they change words, but it leads to big nonsense, especially when you add multiple automatic translation behind, like saying for intensity power or this kind of thing. So sometimes it's like synonym but out of scientific context. So don't be surprised if you end up on these kind of things. And also be ready that sometimes a press release will not work if there is another big thing coming that you are not aware and you couldn't move your own press release. Well, sometime like in the case of KOps, if we would have published what we wanted, there was a big GWST announcement, it would not have worked. So we delayed it because we were aware of it, but if we would not have been, it would not have worked, and that's how it goes. It doesn't mean your science is not valuable, it just means that you might have been unlucky. So, yeah. Also, you will not get any control on all stuff spreads. I will skip illustration because I don't have time, but I'm happy to discuss that afterward if you want. And let's quickly mention how you can interact with journalists. First, when you have a journalist reaching out to you, you should know who they are and their audience. So are they employed by a journal, or are they trying to make an article that they want to sell afterwards? Because that's not the same approach. Are they specialized, or are they generalists and have no clue what is the difference between astronomy and astrology? So that can be the case. Have they experience, or are they completely new beginner, which is the same, they don't know necessarily? Well, try to know that to also adapt to your explanation. And be aware that journalists usually work on very short-term notice. So if they ask you if they can talk the same day to you, don't say, oh, we can talk next week. Try to talk the same day, because the next week, for them, it's finished. They cannot talk about this anymore. So short-term notice a lot. So be ready to be responsive if you do a press release or if you are contacted by journalists. And if you do an interview, make sure you get a good connection and microphone, and to not say anything you will regret later, because there is nothing like off the record. I can give you some very good example of things that should not have been said in radio interview in Switzerland. If you are interested, buy some Nobel Prize. So yes, and that got very angry a lot of people. So don't say anything you will regret afterwards in an interview that you might regret. There is nothing like off the record. So it's really, even if you say, oh, don't diffuse that. No, don't say that. So don't get recorded and say things bad about your colleagues and stuff like that. Yeah. And go to your press officer to ask for advice. Okay, so I have quickly 5 minutes to do another one. Can we switch to the other presentation, please? I actually thought about this yesterday, that I had given some of the points were similar to a presentation I had prepared for my institute mates after EPSC last year. So at EPSC, to give you the process, I had to review something like 300 to 600 abstracts in like a month, which is the short abstract version, which is a lot. And I didn't even add the long one. But I realized there was many mistakes in them, including by some of my colleagues, because I could see all the names, and we were many. So I prepared a few slides of what you should do and not do for abstracts. So mind your audience, we go to the same thing. I will skip. So acronyms, again, don't put acronyms in the abstract if you're not sure the person will know what it is. Structure, So you need to go from A to Z with logical link because you need to be very well structured. Also, you need to tell a story, but you have a limited word count. That's a counter example of what you should do. You need to be very well structured. You only have limited words, so you should go from A to Z for telling your story and use logical link. That, I mean, I've seen some people laughing, but it's really the kind of two examples that you can see when you read abstracts. Like first impression, like yes, so an abstract is the first impression, so you really need to be careful. A lot of people do their abstract, oh yes, submission deadline is in 1 hour, so I need to write my abstract, or 10 minutes, so I need to write my abstract quick, and then you really feel it and it doesn't give impression. So yeah. And from that point of view, don't copy paste long abstract. Usually that's the best way to have missing stuff, or that to have like a sentence that don't make sense because one bit has been removed in the middle and then it doesn't make any sense. And you should write it once and then rewrite it a second time just to make sure you don't have words missing. Also, tell what you are doing. I had an example, for example, we do that to determine any seasonal pattern. And did you find anything? Did you that's very frustrating. If you need to select what will be the stuff, it's not just like, oh, we try to do this. You need to hint at the result you got. Otherwise, why would you be presenting when you are in competition with so many other people? Word count. Some most are around 300 words, I would say, but sometimes for some application, you can only write 150 words. So be very careful, and don't write directly in the form. Write on the word and then copy paste in the form. So you can use like the help of the spell check and so on. It's very important. Captain Obvious, this one is because there are so many abstracts where I read, we perform state-of-the-art simulation. I've never read an abstract so far where they say, we perform really shitty simulations. So this is obvious that it's good simulations. You can skip it because you have a limited number of words. So you can probably skip that. Or like novel simulation, it's different. But like state-of-the-art, it's, in my opinion, not very useful. As I say, it's obvious. This slide has way too much text, but I threw that quickly. So yes, you should ask like a spell check from your colleagues, also to read from other colleagues if it's your first times, and if you do like mistakes in English that are genuine mistake, it's okay. It just shows that your English level is not the best. But that's not a problem. But if you are having like a typo every single word, like inverted letter, maybe you are dyslexic, but if you have like missing letters and so on, then it just shows that you don't pay attention. It doesn't show. And I've seen some abstract where from colleague of mine, so I know they normally write correctly, where there was like a mistake every single word. So I was like, okay, I know they didn't took the time to do this properly. So yeah. If it's an abstract, oversell why your stuff is cool. So, and you can use analogy also for that, but not bad one. Don't use bad analogy. Your work is like the building bricks because it's made of clay, so it's a very bad analogy. So don't use analogy too much because you lose the people, contrary to public talk. Don't forget the context. I had one example where the person was like, these graben are often found in other locations across the moon. I was 100% sure it was about Mars until I read this sentence. The mistake of the person, I think, is because there was East Serenitatis in the title, and they would assume that I knew that it was on the moon and not Mars. But in the session, otherwise, every talking about graben were about Mars. So I was like 100% convinced it was Mars. And until I read this sentence, and then I was like, oh, wait, what? So yes, don't forget to put a bit of context in your abstract. Cut into paragraph. Don't forget the logical links. And thank you for your attention. And I'm feel just on time. Don't hesitate if you have any question. Don't hesitate. I hope the exercise were also useful to get a bit used to talk, like especially with the nasty questions. Why do we need to give money to research? You will get this one a lot if you do public. Thank you, everyone.